Why excellent service is crucial for your success with clients, customers, mandates, anyone you work with. This is the first time where I'm going to tell something really personal in this podcast because it just happened to me last week. Last week, I was sitting with a friend, Alan Stevens, a very well-known media mentor, media expert. You know him from, for example, BBC or Sky News. I sat with him at a place where we haven't met for 18 months due to the pandemic. Normally, we have a tradition. Alan is my former mentor, became a good friend, and now also a business partner. We do a lot of referral business together. And we normally meet for dinner once per month, always at the same place, Brasserie Zedel, Piccadilly Circus in London. And that became a tradition since 2014, 15, I think. So pretty much 6 to 7 years we are sitting there. We're having a nice dinner with a good French wine and talk about everything that life is about. That is the truly French experience, isn't it? Enjoying life and having a good dinner over it with a nice wine. So we went there the first time we met after 18 months because we couldn't meet during the pandemic for obvious reasons. We stick to the rules, which of course is the sensible choice to do. So we were really looking forward to being there and having a good evening together. Well, the evening didn't turn out to be that great because what happened was we sat down, we had our dinner, and suddenly someone popped up just when we were looking at the dessert menu and we were thinking of having another wine, and suddenly someone popped up and that person from the service team said, "I don't want to rush you, but," and we all know these phrases, "I don't want to, but," never a good statement. It's like someone saying, "I'm not racist, but," or your work is really good, but you know something bad is happening, and pretty much the opposite of what the first half of the phrase meant is now happening. So when someone says, "I don't want to rush you, but," if someone says, "I don't want to rush you, but," they want to rush you. So someone popped up and said, "I don't want to rush you, but you have 10 minutes to pay the bill and leave." And of course, we were quite surprised about that because the French experience isn't really to down food and then down a bottle of wine, is it? No, it's not. So we were quite surprised. And then they told us that the restaurant is overbooked. And that is the reason why they are setting a time limit on our table. And that's 90 minutes. And we have to leave in 10 minutes. It would be nice to know that during the booking process, because now some people might claim some restaurants have these rules. Yes, I know. And if I see a restaurant having that rule, I don't book tables in these restaurants. And that didn't happen. I had no time rule whatsoever. So, of course, we told service staff, we're not going to leave in 10 minutes because we have a good wine. I'm not going to down it. Full stop. And then the team leader showed up and told us we have to leave the venue and pay the bill in 10 minutes. And, of course, we said we won't. And then it came to the crucial point where Alan Stevens, my good friend, said, "What happens if we do not leave in 10 minutes?" And then the team leader said, "We will not accept future reservations from you if you do not leave." And I know Alan Stevens for a very long time now. We met for the first time in Vancouver in Canada during an international conference. And he is the definition of a British gentleman. So he never yells, he is never upset, and I've never seen him astonished or stunned or shocked. But I saw him exactly that when this phrase happened. So the team leader said, "We're not going to accept future reservations from you." And Alan Stevens said, "Say that again," which, by the way, is the British word. It's the British version of what the actual F. I'm not going to say that word here on the podcast. And the team leader repeated, "We're not going to accept future reservations from you." So, well, of course, no one escorts us out of a restaurant. So we said we're going to enjoy our wine. We are now not having any dessert, of course not. And they can bring us the bill and we will have a think over that. So the bill arrived and we had our wine. And by the way, when you want to rush people away from tables because you're overbooked, you can be very sure when a German is sitting at the table where you wanted to rush him off from, then the German will look if the restaurant really is overbooked. So we had our wine, we looked at the invoice, we looked at the bill, and the bill had a 15% service charge, which of course we had to take off. The first time ever I asked a restaurant to take the service charge off. We left with a 0 penny tip, which I never did in my whole life as far as I can remember. So, of course, I looked, are these tables all full now? And only in the compartment, only in the part of the restaurant where we were sitting, there were 5 tables still empty. And, when you have a German at the table, we do fact checking. That's just, I am Northern German. That's what we just do. So I just looked at the restaurant. If you know Brasserie Adele, it's a place where you can easily look which tables are full, which tables are not. 19 tables were empty when we left. We left, by the way, at 9:30, 9:45. At least some senior manager then, after we gave the feedback that we are severely dissatisfied and will not return as customers. By the way, when they say they are not going to accept future reservations, we are probably banned. I don't know. The manager then showed up, apologized-ish, but not really. She then asked Alan Stevens to write an email and wanted to give us a reaction. Well, that is now already 4 days ago, and let's face it, or 5 days ago nearly. Let's face it, when you write an email with such an issue and you don't get a reaction, that actually makes it worse. So we are here talking about hospitality that for months, for a good reason during COVID-19, said we are on the brink of extinction, we are all nearly bankrupt. And as soon as you go back to have dinner there, that is the customer experience you get. 90-minute time limits where you rush good clients, long-standing clients out of their seats. By the way, without any need, because you still had empty tables available. So today, and by the way, this is not the only case of bad customer service. My parents my parents are not rich people, public servants. One of their life goals was to go to a very famous marzipan factory with a very famous restaurant, with a very famous cafe. They sat there, and after an hour, some team lead showed up and said, "You have to leave because we have a larger group sitting here." And of course, my parents didn't leave. So this kind of customer service hiccups or just failures happens a lot more frequent than you think. When I arrived in London and I arrived in Heathrow, and then, of course, I took the Heathrow Express because I was in a hurry, had to get into central London. Heathrow Express was cancelled, so you got a very polite notice from Heathrow Express where they said, here's where you can do the refund. I filed the papers for the refund. The email where it said it takes 20 days at the moment to deal with the refund, that was not great. However, still 48 hours later, I had my money back. So they said 20 days, and it took 48 hours. That's a good customer experience. So what went wrong here? Oh, by the way, just to let you know, because some people might say this is all not fair towards customers, and that's true. And when you look at, is fairness really a thing which we can look at scientifically? Yes, it is. When you look at fairness, just yesterday on the English podcast, I published an interview with Graham Jones about fairness. He works for a university in the UK, so highly recommended to listen to that interview. And when you're able to speak German, because customer service is about people and their lives, Dr. Thomas von Fischer, a German former pastor, now working in a hospital as a psychological help person, but he came from the military, so he saw many different people. He is interviewed on the German podcast just yesterday, if you're able to speak German. But now, of course, we have to look at what went wrong, how to do it better. So what went wrong? First aspect is, when you have random standards and you don't announce them, don't expect anyone to follow them. By the way, one of the worst parts of the experience was when the team leader told me the 90-minute rule is in place for a very long time and we can always stick to it because it is in our terms and conditions. Look, when you book a table in a restaurant, reading the terms and conditions is not a common step. But of course, from a legal point of view, you can refer to that. The problem then will be when you have a German at the table, the German will go home and read through your terms and conditions trying to find that rule. And I did exactly that. And surprise, surprise, there is no 90-minute rule in your terms and conditions. There's only one phrase saying, in case of need, with prior announcement, which they didn't in our case, then they can put time limits on there, not mentioning what the time limits will be. So don't tell me terms and conditions, because as a German, I'm going to look it up. And if I don't find what you mentioned, it's going to be more embarrassing than even before. Oh, by the way, you can find the whole story on my Facebook profile. My personal Facebook profile is completely public. I also tagged Brasserie Adele in there. No reaction from them so far. Really bad. So first, when you have random standards without announcement, without prior announcement, don't expect anyone to follow them. When you have, and that's the second aspect, random arbitrary standards, and there is no need for them, it becomes embarrassing. When you want to rush people off the table, and then afterwards people see that you have multiple empty tables, it's an absolute catastrophic embarrassment for your venue. Because we clearly can see you're not able to manage your venue properly. The worst thing of it, however, in my opinion, that's my personal opinion here, is that I am really sure that this decision was not made by the team lead or by the service staff. Some person in some office, sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet, normally someone who has nothing to do with customers whatsoever, probably didn't work in hospitality, but some person, maybe a controller or someone from controlling and optimizing something. So some people would say Excel eunuchs, but that's not a term I would ever use because I think that term is completely inappropriate. But people who only sit in front of Excel sheets, never saw a single customer, but then want to tell people how to deal with customers, normally don't do their job too well. And in my opinion, this 90-minute rule was enforced by someone sitting in a corporate office, maybe a corporation that owns all these restaurants, and they say, hey, we can turn tables more often. Turning tables means changing customers, having other customers in. Turn tables quicker and make more revenue and then more profit by just putting this rule in. It's a typical theoretical decision from someone who has no experience in real-world practice. And when you and that's the fourth aspect, and I am very sure that this kind of corporate rule was pushed on the employees who maybe even revolted about it, saying we shouldn't do that, but then corporate said you must do it, and then they have to follow these rules. And when you and that's the fourth aspect of the problem, when you double down on your nonsense, sorry for that straightforward word, when you double down on your nonsense, why does someone tell me terms and conditions say there's a 90-minute rule? You say that because you are very sure that 99 out of 100 will never go home and look up your terms and conditions. Unfortunately, the German guy is the one that looks up your terms and conditions and then puts it to public. That makes it even worse. And don't double down on your nonsense, random, arbitrary rules. And of course, there are now ways to make this better. So, for example, you can probably train your staff, or your management as well, coaching, consulting, mentoring, or when you need someone for a bit longer, project in interim management, or when you have events, you can have speakers in. Be sure that you have speakers who have a scientific clue about customer service, not just another nice story to hear with no real impact on your organization. I'm happy to help you there. Just send me an email to nb@nb-networks.com, nb@nb-networks.com, or when you're interested in something in writing, articles or similar, expert.nb-networks.com, expert.nb-networks.com. You get a weekly email every Wednesday with lots of content, all of course free of charge, guaranteed 100% content, ad-free, guarantee with podcasts, articles, and more. But now we have to look at how to do it better. Step 1, how to do it better. Always include staff on site when you make a decision with customers. When you sit in your ivory tower, haven't seen a client for months, or let's say weeks, months, maybe years, you will make a wrong decision and it's going to go wrong. This is why you often hear these stories of a new CEO showed up and the first one who ever went to a store and worked on site in a store to see what is going wrong with customers. Groundbreaking. When you know your customer, you make better decisions. Who could have thought? And of course, and that's the second aspect of this, you have to train them. And yes, you have to invest to deliver that training. People immediately realize when you have untrained staff because they're not interested, they're not engaged, they don't know the procedures, and they don't deliver a great experience. Also, and that is aspect number 3, know your clients, know your accounts, know your revenues and profit which you make from different people. And now we have to stick to something which is a very unpopular opinion, because often people like to say, we treat all our customers the same. That is the worst decision you can ever make. And by the way, it's also not true. Do you want to tell me that a client that spends €5 or £5 or $5 with you gets the same customer service level compared to someone who puts $1 million, pound, euros, yen, whatever on the table? Because that would be pretty much of an insult to the person spending more money with you. When someone spends more money with you, they are in a different customer category. But most organizations have very little market segmentation. They have very little knowledge about their clients and customers, either because they don't care or because they are unable to just set rules where they say, that is a Class A, Class B, Class C customer. And I know that people don't like to be classified in A, B, C, better client, worse client, but when you run a business is about making a profit, and you only make a profit when you're able to know what your clients are spending with you. And when you have returning customers who spend more and more money with you, maybe treat them a bit differently. And by the way, when you are on my newsletter, the Expert Excellence letter, there is a VIP list as well, for a reason. Because VIP people are the ones who book more services with me, and they of course get a different treatment than the ones who only read and never spend a single penny. By the way, that's exactly the same with every business. When you go somewhere, when I go to Ferrari, not spending a single penny there, but I say, can I have a coffee? They will chuck me out and say, this is not a hall where you can just warm up, watch cars, have a free coffee. If I spend $1 million there and say, hey, today I have nothing to do here, can I have a coffee? Of course I will get a coffee. You need to have the ability to decide who are you dealing with and what do you derive from the data you have. And of course, that's the fourth aspect. Management and executives must engage on operational level. When I tell you that even executives at Burger King have to work only a couple of days per year at the till, at the drive-thru, in the kitchen. Why? Because they make better decisions when they do so. Groundbreaking. Burger King is not a luxury restaurant experience, as you probably have heard of. It's a fast food chain, but they know when you don't know the customer, when you don't know reality, you can't lead people in this business. And that's exactly the right thing to do. Train them also on the job. When you have leaders there, they know what are the procedures and what are the challenges you are facing with the customers. And of course, aspect number 5, be available. The good part of the experience we had here was that the manager was available. Not so great that we send an email and nothing happens afterwards. And the 6th part is always show up with a solution. Just think of the same situation we were in. Let's say they were overbooked, which by the way, they weren't, as we found out then. But let's say you were really overbooked and you have to do something about that. If you approach us, same situation. Alan and I sitting there just looking at the dessert menu, and you pop up and say, excuse me, we have a bit of a situation here. We unfortunately overbooked the restaurant. Would you accept that when we reseat you to the Bar Américain, which is the next door, is a bar, not a restaurant, different chairs, etc. And you say, you get the dessert in the bar and there's a free and then some sort of drink, which we can choose, a free drink on the house. Would you be okay with moving over there? Of course we would have done that. Because we don't want to be problematic to your business. We want to have a great experience for absolutely anyone. And of course, we know, because we are both business owners, that sometimes things can go wrong, but it's about how you deal with it. And you have to deal with it with a solution in mind. Don't make your problem my problem. When you say, we are overbooked, you have to leave. No, I don't. I honestly was expecting that someone shows up with security or the police escorting us out. But they didn't. Maybe because they heard a German accent and they were scared. Who knows? But I knew that when I put it online, and tag Brasserie Zedel, and you don't show a single reaction to this problem, which is really bad from your social media team as well, one restaurant in Olympic Park, and when you're listening to this, you know who you are, texted me on social media and said, very sorry that you had this experience. We're not going to comment on other restaurants' performances, but if you're looking for an alternative, maybe consider us. We're happy to invite you on the first meal. Let us know if you want to come along. And guess where Ellen and I will be next Tuesday? In exactly that restaurant. And when they do well, we have a new restaurant where we go every month to have a really good dinner with nice food and nice drinks. Because some people see customer service as a solution-oriented approach, instead of just telling us, here's the problem and you have to deal with it. Because that's what they did with us, the Brasserie Zedel, which is very, very disappointing and very sad as well. So always think of a solution, because when you come up with a solution, customers, clients normally are the ones who like to cooperate with you, because we all want to work together. We all like to have the stability of having providers who can work with us, where you can go there and just have a good time. And even when something goes wrong, they're going to deal with it. And we find a solution for all of us, and not being chucked out because you overbooked your tables. And then afterwards, by the way, we left 9:30, 9:45 and saw that nearly 20 tables were still free, which was embarrassing for the location. So, of course, I can highly recommend to listen to the podcast yesterday, Fairness with Graham Jones, because perception of fairness and not fairness is really important when it comes to customer service. That interview was published yesterday on the English channel of this podcast, which you're listening to right now, and the German podcast about people and different paths in life with Dr. Thomas von Fischer. That's the German podcast. So if you like to listen to that, have fun with that as well. I am very happy about the discussion we have, by the way, with the listeners of this podcast. Very respectful, even when we disagree, very respectful disagreements, but very good discussions, calls, Zooms, emails, really great. Feel free to drop me an email at any time, nb@nb-networks.com, nb@nb-networks.com. And now it is important that you apply what we talked about in your organization, because that's what your organization thrives on. Because in times after COVID-19, no matter what you do, someone else is doing it as well. And you know that. We are not the only ones offering these services. And customer service is the distinction between doing something well, or doing something great. And that, for example, is the reason why my clients can always reach out to me, not only via email, but also via WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, and get really quick responses. Because for whatever reason in my industry, many people are unable to give same-day answers. And I am, and my customers appreciate that. Looking forward to hearing from you now. I wish you all the best putting the tips I gave you and the approaches we talked about into the practice of your organization. So at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.